Hi guys, welcome to my channel. So today we're going to learn a little bit about color correcting for brown or South Asian or olive skin tones. So normally what we see for color correcting when it comes to darker skin tones is a lot of using these bright orange pigments like this. And it can look a little bit crazy. And today I'm going to show you 3 methods, one of which is going to be using the bright orange pigment. So just to fill you in on why we use orange pigments to correct darker skin tones, I'm going to hold up this color wheel. When we talk about darkness in the skin, you can see that the darker, cooler tones are over here, which are like the bluey, reddier tones. So they're easier to see in lighter skin tones where you can see a lot of the discoloration is bluey and purpley. But in darker skin tones, because our skin is so warm, they do tend to show up kind of just as, you know, darker brown spots on our skin. So if we get dark circles around the eyes or darkness around the mouth, you would be looking at how to correct from just the darker colors here. And if we look opposite from the dark colors here, we can see that the colors that show up are the bright orange, the orangey yellow, or just yellow here. And the point of color correcting is that we're not using heavy concealers to cover up what we don't want, and using complementary colors, which just means the opposite color from what you want to correct, to neutralize what we don't want there. So because we're correcting darkness today, we're gonna kind of go to the reddier orangey tones. So I'll show you how to do that in 3 simple ways today. So the first thing we're gonna do is actually use an orange pigment. So I have the NYX orange concealer here. It's pretty much just like a really bright orange creamy concealer. It looks like that. So one of the rules for using correctors, especially when it comes to the orangey tones, is the one that we tend to end up using for all skin tones to correct all darkness, say underneath the eye. So we see that the orange here is very, very bright. This would be perfect for medium to deeper skin tones. If you were a lighter skin tone, you would want to use a lighter orange along the lines of something like a peach or a salmon color or a light pink color almost. The deeper your skin tone is, the more bright and pure you want that pigment to be. So to start off with this orange concealer, I'm just taking a fluffy synthetic brush, and then I'm just gonna lightly dip into this. And then I'm just taking some off on the back of my hand. The darkness that I tend to get is just dark circles around the eyes, and then I get this kind of darkness around my mouth and then chin here. It doesn't look so bad when I'm not wearing makeup, but as soon as I put on makeup, those areas start to turn very gray, and that's kind of the problem that we have as darker skin people. Foundation just does not go on evenly. You're just gonna start lightly buffing it into the areas that are sort of darker for you. So I'm just taking that all around my mouth, and you see that I also have like this ring of darkness around my lips. I kind of take it over the top like that as well, and it just neutralizes and brightens things up a bit. Dear Lord. Okay, and then just taking a little bit over those dark creases and a little bit around my nose, and just taking the leftover on the rest of my lip. Now when you start off, you're gonna have to do a little bit of trial and error. So when I'm first doing this, it looks adequately brightened and orange around my mouth, but I know from experience that when I put on foundation over top of this, if I don't make maybe the chin area here a little bit more bright, it still tends to show up a little bit gray. There's still shadowiness around, so I'm gonna have to make it brighter. So I'm just gonna take a bit more in that area, and then around that mouth where I get my mustache. Okay, so that's as bright as I'll kind of take it there. Now around the eyes, I don't get as much shadowiness. I can get away with using less. We're just gonna start to buff it out in here. Okay, so you can see it looks a little bit orange around my eyes, but it's pretty well brightened, and I don't need a lot more there. And if you ever feel like you put too much on, you can just take like a damp beauty sponge and just press that around. You know, again, makeup sometimes is just trial and error, and you gotta play around with it to figure out what works for you. Now anytime we're using a pure orange corrector, The proper way to cover it is by using like a medium to full coverage concealer or foundation. So if you do like wearing medium to full coverage foundation on a day-to-day basis, you can just go over that and then use your concealer around the eye. I personally like wearing lighter to medium coverage foundations, so what I like to do is take a full coverage concealer and just conceal the areas that we've corrected. The concealer that I'm going to use today is the Kevyn Aucoin Sensual Skin Enhancer in the shade SX08, and it's about the same shade as my skin tone. What I'm going to do is take a dense brush. This is from Real Techniques, and I believe it is like a shadow or shader brush. It's the perfect brush to use to conceal because it's small and dense. I'm just gonna again dip a little bit into the pot, and then I'm gonna take off any excess concealer on the back of my hand because we never want to go in with a crazy amount of product to start. And then just start stippling it onto the areas that we've corrected. Stippling just means you're tapping it on. You're not moving the product around underneath. It's just gonna blend it out for you as you go. I'm depositing the color where I need the most coverage first, and then I slowly start to diffuse it out when I have less product left. And then just picking up a bit more product there. And then just take your damp sponge and just press in the edges so it's seamless with the skin, and then just lightly press it over the top of where you've concealed those areas. That's how you correct darkness with an orange pigment. And I really love this technique because you can pretty much leave it here and then do your blush and bronzer or whatever over top without using any foundation, and your skin just looks so fresh and even. What I like to do if I'm wearing foundation is I do this step and then I use like a BB cream or a sheer foundation on top and then do the rest of my makeup. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take all of this off, and we're gonna move on to the next step. Alright, so for the second step, instead of using an orange concealer and then a full coverage concealer, we're going to use a concealer that has a slightly orange undertone to correct in one step. Currently in my collection, I have 3 concealers with an orangey undertone, and they all do a really good job of correcting. So the first concealer that I have is the e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer in the shade Medium Beige, and you can already see that it's pretty orangey. And then I also have the Maybelline Fit Me concealer in the shade Honey. And then lastly, I have the Nars Radiant Creamy Concealer in the shade Biscuit. I'm gonna go ahead and swatch all 3 of these just to show you kind of what they look like on the skin. Right, so I have the 3 concealers swatched on the back of my hand. So I have the e.l.f. here, the Maybelline in the middle, and the Nars on the end here. You can see that the e.l.f. one is a little bit darker than my skin tone, but it's still pretty orange, so it works great on those very dark areas. The Maybelline one is about the depth of my skin tone, but it still has that orangier undertone. The Nars one is a little bit different because you can see it's more on like the peachy salmony side. It almost has a bit of a pink undertone. It is still warm, but it's definitely a little bit more pinky. You can use this and it does a good job, but I definitely think the ones that have a warmer orange undertone do a better job. So if you were a medium skin tone and you were more of a neutral undertone and not as yellow, this one would probably do a really good job for you. I'm going to use all 3 of these on my face to just show you the difference today. So I'm going to use the e.l.f. on my chin and around my mouth. So just gonna place them there. And this is also very full coverage, so just start off with a small amount. It doesn't look like a small amount, but whatever. And then because I want to keep the coverage here, I'm going to use a dense like foundation brush. This is the Real Techniques Expert Face Brush. So I'm just going to start tapping that. Definitely used way too much there, but that's okay. So you can see that I literally just corrected that all in one step there, and I didn't have to use a crazy orange and a full coverage concealer. I'm gonna put the Maybelline around one eye, and I'm going in with the Nars around the other eye. So for this, because I don't need as much coverage, I'm going to use my sponge. So do you see how much brighter this eye is compared to this one where we haven't corrected it yet? It just did such a good job in one step. So I'm going to go ahead and blend out the Nars. So you can see that the Nars one did correct and it did a really good job. So there's nothing wrong with that. I personally do prefer the Maybelline side more because it's a little bit brighter. And then on the Nars side, I can definitely see more of like this darkness and the groove and around the eyes here. So let me just go in with a little bit more and see if that helps. That looked like it helped a little bit, but to be honest, if I feel like I'm paying that much for the Nars concealer, then I don't want to have to use as much product to do the job like the Maybelline and the e.l.f. And I think this is really good. It definitely did the job. And I think that if you had more of a neutral undertone, that this would look even brighter on your skin. For me personally, I do prefer the e.l.f. and the Maybelline. And then I've seen other brands that have orangey undertone concealer. MAC is a really good one because they have such a large shade range. I think you can use maybe like the NC40, NC42, NC45. They're a little bit orangier, so when I'm more tan in the summertime, I can use those shades. But you can always go to the store and just swatch them on the back of your hand and see what looks more orange or more pink. And same thing as the last step. You can just do this for a natural makeup look, or you can do this and then just completely go over with your foundation. This is the method that is my favorite because I feel like it looks less cakey on my skin. So I'm just gonna go take this off and we're gonna come back and do the last step. So the final method is using a color correcting foundation to correct the skin tone. So I've already corrected the dark circles around my eyes so you can see what the foundation looks with everything put together. This is the same idea as the last step of using a product with an orangey undertone to correct the areas that you need. What I have here are two foundations. I have the Maybelline Dream Urban Cover in my normal skin tone, which is soft tan, and then I have the NYX Bear With Me Tinted Skin Veil in the shade Golden Camel. So I have the Maybelline Soft Tan here and the NYX Golden Camel. You can see that the Maybelline one is that olivey undertone and it matches my skin, and then the NYX one is more on the orangey yellow side. And then just to compare, I swatched the MAC Studio Fix foundation in NC40, which is right here, and you can see again it's that yellow undertone foundation with a bit of oranginess to it. So what I'm gonna do is use both of these foundations on half of my face each, obviously just around the mouth, and then I'm going to use my normal foundation shade all over the rest of my face. So I'm going to start off with the color correcting shade first. I'm going to put the NYX on this side. I do have to use quite a bit of it because it's very, very sheer. I think that's about good. I'm going to use that same foundation brush to just pat it in. So again, we're not buffing, we're just lightly patting that in to keep the coverage. As you can see, if we compare the two sides, it did such a good job of brightening and correcting the darkness around my mouth. Now, this shade is slightly darker than my natural skin tone, but it's totally fine because once we put the other foundation on and blend the powders and everything, it just evens out. I'm just gonna go ahead and put the MAC NC40 on the other side. And this one is more full coverage, so I'm not gonna do as much. Okay, so I actually think that the MAC side matches the depth of my skin a lot better. They both did a really good job, but because the MAC is more full coverage, it not only covered really well, but it also did a good job of correcting. And I mean, the NYX side isn't bad either, but you can see it's still a little bit darker than my skin tone. But I mean, regarding any darkness around the mouth, it looks like it's completely gone. With the NYX side, because it's more of like a tinted moisturizer, you can still see a little bit of darkness come through, but honestly, if you were going for more of like a natural foundation look or no makeup look, this would be a perfect one to use. But for me, I do prefer the MAC side better. I'm just going to remove the NYX side and go over with the MAC there instead and show you the completed foundation look. So with that corrected, I'm just going to go in with the normal foundation shade. And then when I get over the edge of where I corrected, I'm just patting it so I'm not moving any of that product underneath away. All right, so there you go. That is the last technique. It did a really good job of evening out the skin tone. If I wanted to do no makeup, I would definitely do this. The skin looks so perfected. There is a final way of doing correcting, and that's using powders. Literally the same theory. You're just using a powder with an orangier undertone. But the only powders that I have with the warmer orange undertone is the MAC NC42. I also have the MAC NC45. They're both a little bit too dark for my skin tone right now, but when I'm tanned, it's perfect. I have the MAC NC42 here. It's a little bit broken, but you can see it's pretty yellow with an orangier undertone. It's basically slightly darker than the NC40 that I used around my mouth. Because I use just a foundation and it doesn't have as much coverage as the concealer, you can see that maybe there's like a little bit of grayness still around the mouth. So I'm just going to take that powder on a little fluffy brush and I can just pat that over those areas. Not only did it give me more coverage, but it actually did a really good job of further correcting the discoloration around my mouth. So there you have it, guys, a few easy ways to color correct from medium to darker skin tones. I hope this helped you guys have a clearer understanding of color correcting and that it doesn't have to be messy or crazy or confusing. So just have fun playing around with it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more content. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you guys again soon.